time-restricted eating with an 8-hour eating window followed by a 16-hour fasting window showed weight loss and lower postprandial glucose level in people with type 2 diabetes. Now, this approach was more successful, easier to follow, and easier to maintain than calorie restriction diets. And we've known this for a very long time. So for the most part, when you have a eating window that you restrict, I actually prefer a early time restricted feeding. So that means sort of that you cut out your eating early in the day. That usually works very well for people. And that's several studies have shown this. 8 hours worked better than a 10-hour. There's another study that showed that in 10 hours, the results weren't as impressive. So 8 hours seems to be working very well. The caveat here is that I always say is like, if you do this every day, your body gets used to this. So your metabolic rate might slow down because your body just knows, hey, I have this certain eating window and then I have a fasting window. So I kind of know what's coming in. It's good to confuse your metabolism. So I wouldn't necessarily do this every day. I would actually purposely pick a day or two where you eat later, where you have maybe a 10 to 12 hour eating window. And for some people also, it works if they have sort of a cheat meal over the weekend. And that's the other limitation of studies like this. They didn't really restrict what people could eat. This was only a time restriction eating. And so I think there's some shortcomings there, right? Most of those studies did not really show significant changes in hemoglobin A1C. So the hemoglobin A1C is your average blood sugar over a period of 3 months. And for most of these studies, that wasn't affected very much. But again, I think because these studies only did the time-restricted eating without changing what you're eating and also how the timing is in that eating window, I think that's the shortfall of these studies. I think it's good to do studies that only have one parameter. So here the one parameter was, let's shorten the eating window. And that's good. It showed a positive effect. It showed it was easy to follow. It showed weight loss, and that's great, right? But I think we can improve this. I think for most people, and you don't have to be type 2 diabetic. I think this goes for most people that want to lose some weight or want to prevent gaining weight, right? That's another thing. I think if we have a time-restricted eating window for most days of the week between 8 and 10 hours, and then you can pick a day or two where you purposely eat a bit later to confuse your metabolism. I also would say switch. Maybe some days start a bit later to eat your eating window, and other days I would suggest actually to do an early time-restricted feeding, which works better for most people. So it means cutting out the dinner early, right? Having your last meal, let's say, at 3 or 4 o'clock, and that works for some people. But I think, we should do these variations. And then during the eating window, the composition of food is hugely important. I always say prioritize protein with your meals, Try to decrease fat as best as you can. Fat is, of course, very dense in calories. It's about 9 calories per gram, whereas carbohydrates and proteins are only 4 calories per gram. But I would really restrict it as much as you can, and then try to keep your carbohydrates on a lower level. For most people, to start out with, try to limit it to 150 grams of carbs a day. And then you can even go lower if that doesn't work for you. And if you have impaired glucose tolerance or you have early diabetes, you might have to go lower to about 100 grams a day. And I think it's very doable. But it's something that you can down-regulate. But keep your protein adequate. Always talk to your doctor what's the right amount for you. For most people, 0.8 to 1 gram per pound is an upper value that might work. But again, you might have a medical condition where you can't do that, so talk to your doctor. So again, I think it's good that we have these studies. I think they give us valuable information. But I think to make this better and more successful, we should, of course, influence what we eat and then the timing of the food as well, right? Okay, there were a couple of questions. One about the artificial food dyes. Why are they still allowed in the US when other countries don't allow these? Great question. I mean, the FDA, like I mentioned before, has not really yet conducted their own study into how they influence behavior in children. Again, we've known about these issues since the 1970s. Since 2011, we know that these are neurotoxic. I think it's a shame that we still have them on the market. I think the best we can do is educate ourselves. I would like to see labels on these foods to say, hey, this crap is in here. There's red number 40 and blue number 2 or whatever else it is. They've been shown to be neurotoxic and adversely affect the development of your child. If you still want to buy it, that's on you, right? That's the same warning we have on cigarette cartons, right? But again, I think the FDA, in my opinion, makes a lot of compromises with the industry. I think we need a government agency that stands up more for the consumer and especially for children. Because let's face it, I mean, you see these beautiful pictures and bright colors in the cereal aisle. What are they for? They're there to attract children to buy this stuff, right? And we're giving children things that are really horrible and toxic, in my opinion. So I think this is absolutely not okay. And I think we should have stricter regulations here. Just my opinion, of course. Then about the bread. So since I'm back in the US, I don't eat much bread here, but I have now found a bagel that I kind of like. It's called Dave's Killer Bread. I don't know if this is only in California, I'm not sure, but they have organic. So Dave's bread is organic, and when you read the labels, it's on the plain bagels, it's different flours that are all organic. Hopefully that means no pesticides, no herbicides, of course. Also, I hope it means they don't contain potassium bromate. And I talked about that before. That's certainly very toxic stuff. They use it to make the dough rise faster and make it more fluffy and light and all those kind of things. However, there is a requirement. Companies are required to list brominated flour in the ingredients list if they use it. So I'm hoping they all adhere to this. I hope that Dave's Killer Bread doesn't use it. I didn't see it on the label, so I'm thinking this one is okay. There might be other organic breads out there, of course, that are good as well. This is one that I've tried, and we all eat it and we all tolerate it very well. I don't think it's as tasty as the bread in Germany or in France or in Italy. I think those are much better. But in the meantime, we have stuff here I think that we can use as well. Bread is not my favorite food to eat, but we also got to see this. We got to have some variety in our foods, and it's also one of the cheaper things that we can eat. And let's face it, food has become crazy expensive. I'm spending about, I'd say, 30% more at the grocery store than I used to. That's a huge difference. So we got to make our money work as well. Get foods that are reasonable, at least in terms of price. So again, you can find organic breads. I think they are okay. I'm hoping they all adhere to the regulations, but I think that's a good compromise for now.